even the occasional shy fisher cat. Heavy swaths of sugar maple and tall ash gave way to sheltered fields ringed by wild blueberry and serviceberry. A beautiful land, neither worked nor spoiled by man, going back almost forever. A deciduous Eden. I had cut a dowsing rod and was walking, daydreaming a little. Whenever I sensed a sweet spot, even if the stick wasn't reacting, I stopped and looked around. A dowser who knows what she's doing can half the time anticipate where the land will give up its water beneath. A big patch of wild leeks reveals nearly as much as a witching stick does about approximate trove of water near the surface. I drifted along through a thicket of shadblow and wood roadies all waist and shoulder high. It smelled like strong spring, that sex and excrement odor of the world reawakening. There was a narrow curtain of lime green and red buds at the end of this scrub corridor where the woods picked up and the land began to rise a touch. A red-winged blackbird cried out over my left shoulder, not far away. Again, a telltale sign there would be at least a shallow vein of water here, as redwings prefer to nest in cattail wetlands. Then, without warning or any clear reason my mood should change, a black sensation just poured in over and through me. It felt as if a spontaneous malevolent thunderhead had come flying fast over the ridge to instantly eclipse my world. I was, essentially and all of a sudden, deeply depressed. In retrospect, I wonder if I didn't weep. Must have blinked through my tears because I did move forward out of the flat scrub and into the edge of the forest there. A girl, maybe in her middle teens. She wore a white sleeveless blouse, bedazzled with large dark violet flowers, fanciful orchids or gardenias, which was knotted just above her navel. A denim skirt came down not quite to her knees, barefoot, her feet pointed outward in a kind of loose releve. It's like some ballet dancer frozen in the classic first position. Her wavy hair was brushed neatly, elegantly over her shoulders, as if she were going to a party. She was hanged with a rope about her neck, not swaying in any breeze, but dead still as a plumstone. Her face bore an unaccountably serene, unforgiving half-smile. Her pale, quite colorless eyes stared straight ahead. She seemed somehow familiar, but that couldn't be right. For one last moment of hope, I thought, no. This was a doll, a horrific and perfectly wrought wax figurine, lifelike to a fault. Its martyrdom here was ceremonial, some sort of devil worship or maybe a terrible practical joke. Prankster drugged-up teens from a nearby town with nothing better to do than hold a sick ritual, a hazing in the middle of nowhere. Then I looked once more at the ashen face. This was no mannequin, no lifelike dummy. She was none other than a girl who was alive probably last week, maybe yesterday, and wasn't alive now. I couldn't help myself. I wasn't thinking. I should have left her alone. Shouldn't have touched anything. It was a crime scene, after all. Instead, I went and embraced her. She was light as a dried cornstalk, a shed skin. Wasn't cold or warm. I held her in my arms and told her I was sorry, that I wished with all my heart I could have helped her. Only after a moment of standing there whispering these words did it dawn on me that I myself might be in danger. Averting my eyes from the girl, I backed away from the woods toward the clearing a little. Numb, I studied the shadows shuffling across the ground, the outcroppings of glacial schist that jutted up here and there, the thin pools of standing water left from last night's rain. Last night's rain. Her clothing was neat and dry, which meant her hanging happened sometime this morning. I was seized by the sickening prospect that someone was nearby taking me in, deciding how to deal with this unexpected, unwelcome intrusion. Like him or them, I needed to think what to do. Slowly, in a quivering whisper, I began to spell the word patience backward, one of Knapp's many quaint and sane methods for clearing the mind before beginning to douse. But this was not a usual divining, and I didn't make it through all the letters before realizing that the immediate world had gone quiet. It would have been comforting to hear some bird call. No air moved through the trees to rustle their budded limbs and first leaves. Gone were the tree frogs' peepings I had heard. The dark tide of feeling that had engulfed me before now switched into another register. I became alert and focused and oddly unfeeling. A hasty breeze arose. The highest branches of the trees creaked like rusty harrow tines. I turned in place and looked back the way I had come. A narrow path to the south of the scrub flat, which I hadn't noticed before, led through the thick growth toward a copse of cherries and ironwood beyond. Deer trail, I guessed. Nothing to do with this girl. I turned to face her again. What unspeakable terror she must have experienced. Yet it didn't look like she had struggled. She appeared shocked and forlorn, yet so eerily serene, which was more or less how I felt, though not serene but rather momentarily emptied, blank. Seemed as if I should apologize to her once more, this time for having to leave her here alone. Her feet were only a stool's height from the ground, carpeted with last year's dead leaves and long, creeping, lovely ribbons of staghorn club moss. Curious how the ground around her appeared completely undisturbed, as if she'd been put here by some creature with wings. Without thinking, I asked aloud, "Is anyone there?" My voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it before, hollow, reedy, and helpless. Faint as a half-forgotten memory, I heard a family of chickadees call to one another. Like distant silver bells chiming an hour, their song insisted it was time to leave. My feet began to carry me away from the clearing. I had the distinct sensation of being watched, if not by living eyes, then by her calm and accusing ones. Despite my desire not to, I kept turning, looking behind. I must have run part of the way. No one followed me, so far as I could see. The scene goes on for a bit. Then the novel... Thanks for coming, Bobby. Good to see you. Then the novel moves in different narrative directions, and what happens essentially is the authorities come with her, and they don't find anything. No hanged girl, nothing. And so now she looks quite mad indeed. Her dear friend Niles, who's the sheriff of the town, comes back a couple of days later just to look one more time, just to make sure, and in a way to kind of comfort her. Like, they come in from a different angle going down into this valley. So let me just read you a little bit of this, and then we'll leave it at that. The birds were riotous this morning, warblers carrying on like some piccolo orchestra gone joyously mad. So noisy it was, almost annoying. As I walked, looking right and left and above me and sometimes behind, a fitful chill ran through me. Then a wave of curious fatigue as we made our way inevitably toward the central, overgrown floodplain that lay at the bottom of the slope. Even though Niles was, while walking ahead, disturbing the fallen leaves and undergrowth, breaking dead limbs and branches where he stepped on them, it seemed clear that this had been a thoroughfare of sorts. Lightly used, yes, but used. So I was thinking, who would bother but somebody who relished solitude, or who preferred that others not see their deeds, or both? But then it could as easily be a poacher trail. Many were the evenings at my parents' farmhouse, which was much more remote than mine, and indeed closer to Henderson's, when we heard gunfire during the months not set aside for such activities. Niles? He had gotten pretty far ahead of me, or rather, I had fallen behind. I could just make out his red and purple jacket through the crowded mesh of tree limbs. In another week or two, he would have been invisible behind a thick scrim of leathery green leaves. Niles, slow down. He walked a little farther, and then I saw him stop, not necessarily because of me. It wasn't as if he turned and shouted back my name or acknowledged my calling out to him. I hurried down the path, through zigzags of toppled trees, huge trunks fallen so long ago that moss and wild mushrooms had taken up residence on their woody carcasses. He was standing over a knit cap, his jaws flexing as they habitually did whenever he was upset. Bright pink with a black tassel, It wasn't clean, but neither was it so dirty that there was much chance it had languished here all winter long. He photographed and bagged it, marked the location with tape. I was speechless. Without exchanging words, we both searched the forest floor, but found nothing else. Niles said, "Your description didn't include a pink cap." That's because she wasn't wearing one. He was weighing what to do. "Any sense of how far we are from that grove where you allegedly saw her?" "Allegedly?" He didn't respond. "I'm guessing we're not that close," I answered into the quiet. "Another 300-400 yards." "I know I asked you yesterday, but are you absolutely sure you took us back to the same exact spot where you'd been earlier?" "No question. Besides, you saw my divining rod was there." "That doesn't prove much. You could have dropped it anywhere along the way." "Niles, I did not lead you to the wrong place." We walked on. The bird song thinned out. Just some complaining crows floated by overhead. The trail disappeared, then reappeared now and again, and we managed to stay on it, more or less, all the way down. I had no reason to believe it would lead us to the hanging ground. But when it did, I remembered this copse of ironwoods and black cherry trees with razor clarity. Niles did also. We hiked, him first, along the same narrow path that I had surmised was a deer run, and quickly came upon the clearing where, on its farther verge, stood a beetle-branched tree. It looked for all the world like a photographic negative of a lightning mass. St. Elmo's fire done up in black. She was absent this morning as yesterday afternoon. The walnuts and maples glistened in wan, filtered sunlight. Niles had combed through this scrub before, but he went searching again now while I stayed behind in a blind of bushes. How was it that the birds were so voiceless in this spot? Birds always were to my mind the very freest of all creatures. Why they avoided singing in a landscape so naturally suited to them was beyond me, as if their silence were condemnatory. I stood just where I had the day before. While I could mentally paint the hanged girl right where she had been, there was no willing her back into being. For the briefest moment I felt remorse, and not a little shame, for having dragged Niles down here in the first place. I had to admit to myself, it must have been a cognitive slippage, a gross delusion. To have held her in my arms, though? I was mired in confusion, wanted to leave here now, go home to my boys, and forget any of this happened. I was wasting everybody's time. Niles, my mother, Nep, the twins, everyone had all been put out for no good reason. Then Niles materialized from the scrub. His face was as pale as an anemone. In his gloved left hand he was holding a long, light brown snake. It dangled there, dead. Quietly he said, "Let's get you out of here." His revolver was drawn, I saw. He held it in his right hand, pointed earthward. The snake was a rope. Thanks.